If the only thing people learned was not to be afraid of their experience, that alone would change the world, said Sydney Banks. Welcome to the second part of Don't Believe Everything You Think by Joseph Nguyen. All right, the last episode, if you did not watch that, please go watch that, or you will be very confused. Because in the last episode, we went through chapters 1 through 5, including the introduction. So, this episode, we start chapter 6 with that quote by Sydney Banks. Chapter 6 is how the human experience is created, the 3 principles. At its fundamental level, the human experience is created by these 3 principles: universal mind, consciousness, and thought. These 3 principles work together to allow us to experience everything we do in life. If one of the 3 is missing, we won't be able to experience anything. Sydney Banks first discovered these principles, and now I have the humbling privilege of sharing them with you. Understanding these 3 principles enables us to know how we can alleviate ourselves from our suffering, but also allows us to create from source. All right, universal mind. Universal mind is the intelligence behind all living things. It is the life force and energy that is in all things. It is how an acorn knows how to grow into a tree, how the planets know how to stay in orbit, and how our bodies know how to heal itself when we get a cut. It's how our bodies know how to self-regulate and keep us alive without us having to manually do everything like breathing and beating our hearts. The intelligence that knows how to do all of this and is in everything is called the universal mind. Many call this God. Many call this infinite intelligence. Some call it the quantum field, source, and other names. This is where the thoughts come from and everything else in the universe. All things are connected by the universal mind. There is no separation between anything. And anytime there seems to be separation between things, it is merely an illusion of our thinking. When we are connected to universal mind, we feel whole. We feel fulfilled, filled with love, joy, peace, and inspiration. It is only when we begin thinking, believing the illusion or the ego, that we block this flow of universal mind and begin to feel separated. Frustrated, lonely, angry, resentful, sad, depressed, and fearful. All right, let's talk about the universal consciousness. Universal consciousness is the collective consciousness of all things. Okay, before he goes on, I talk about this all the time in this podcast. I just never called it universal consciousness. We call it strategy. We call it a game of chess. We call it critical thinking. How is that the same? It's knowing the impact of every thought, every movement, every intention, and how that will impact everything down the line, whether it's business or personal. You're not going to go and start a business when you have a family and not tell your wife you did that. Why? It has impacts on every member of that family. You're not going to make a decision and spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on a CapEx project that you didn't get pre-approved with either the budgetary process or an emergency process that went through. You don't make decisions, you don't act, you don't react without thinking of the consequences or the impact, not just to yourself, but everybody around you. That is the universal mind. If you say, well, if you say that there's a victimless crime out there, there's not. Even theft is not a victimless crime, because at some point you're hurting a corporation. Even if you don't like corporations or businesses, big businesses, what are they going to do in turn to cost save? What are they going to do as a consequence of too much theft? Well, they're going to write it off as a loss, for one, but for two, they're going to cut costs somewhere, and it's always the bottom line. At the very bottom is where they will start. Every single action, every single word, every single thought impacts someone else, which impacts someone else, which impacts someone else, and so on and so forth until you get to every person in the world. It's just like frequency with sound. Sound frequency can travel anywhere. We'll get to that later. Universal consciousness is the collective consciousness of all things. It is what allows us to be aware that we exist and aware of our thoughts. Without universal consciousness, we wouldn't be able to experience anything. Our five senses would be useless because there's nothing to be aware of. This is what brings things to life and makes them perceivable to us. Okay, universal thought. Universal thought is the raw material of the universe from which we can create from. It's the object we can perceive through consciousness. Without thought, we would have nothing to be aware of. Thought is like the DVD that contains all of the information for us to watch the movie on the TV. The TV and the DVD player are like consciousness. They allow us to have a mechanism to bring the information on the DVD to life so that we can watch and experience the movie. The electricity needed to power the DVD player and TV is like universal mind, in the sense that it is the invisible energy force that connects and powers all things. It is the source from which everything can work and function. Beautiful. I don't even need to add any commentary to it. Again, I'm biased because I love this book, because I've seen the impacts, the positive impacts that this book has not only had on myself, but other people that have shared and reviewed their experiences with this book with me. Chapter 7. Christine Evangelo said, "A crowded mind leaves no space for a peaceful heart." Hashtag it, put it on a sweater. I don't care, but I love it. It's absolutely true. Chapter 7 is, if thinking is the root cause of suffering, how do we stop the thinking? Yes, do tell the secrets of the universe. Because do not feel discouraged if you too cannot stop your mind from thinking. It is by far the most difficult thing to achieve. It takes so much practice and so much inner work to be able to hold that balance of no thought for an extended period of time. So don't feel discouraged. Just keep practicing. Just like Dory said, right? Just keep swimming. Just keep swimming. That's why we break everything out day by day. You take it day by day, one small thing at a time. And then you eventually get the big goal at the end. That big fish. Heaven and Hell, a Zen parable. I love a good parable. Let's hear it. A tough, brawny samurai once approached a Zen master deep in meditation. Impatient and discourteous, the samurai demanded in his husky voice, so accustomed to forceful yelling, "Tell me the nature of heaven and hell." The Zen master opened his eyes, looked the samurai in the face, and replied with a certain scorn, "Why should I answer to a shabby, disgusting, despondent slob like you? A worm like you, do you think I should tell you anything? I can't stand you. Get out of my sight. I have no time for silly questions." The samurai could not bear these insults. Consumed by rage, he drew his sword and raised it to sever the master's head at once. Looking straight into the samurai's eyes, the Zen master tenderly declared, "That's hell." The samurai froze. He immediately understood that anger had him in its grip. His mind had just created his own hell. One filled with resentment, hatred, self-defense, and fury. He realized that he was so deep in his torment that he was ready to kill someone. Eyes filled with tears. He set his sword aside, he put his palms together, and bowed in gratitude for the insight. The Zen master gently acknowledged with a delicate smile and said, "And that's heaven." That peace is heaven. That is what we are all actually chasing. Peace. Peace of mind. escaping the thoughts inside of our head. It's not possible to just entirely stop thinking. It is, but it's very difficult. If you do humming while you're meditating and you practice every day, you can stop thinking. Freaky things will happen though. Cool, freaky things. I digress. It's not possible to just entirely stop thinking, but we can reduce the time we spend thinking so that it gets smaller and smaller each day that passes. Eventually, we can get to the point where we spend most of our day not caught up in our thinking and live in a blissful state most of the time. Yes, it's true. When we say that we want to stop thinking, many people assume that we are trying to stop all thoughts in general. This isn't what we're trying to do. Now that you know the difference between thoughts and thinking, we are working on allowing thoughts to come and flow through us while we minimize the thinking about the thoughts that emerge. The most interesting and almost paradoxical thing about stopping our thinking is that we don't have to do anything to minimize it other than to be aware of it. By us becoming aware that we are thinking and that it is the root cause of all of our suffering, it automatically makes us conscious to the fact and we become detached to it, allowing it to settle and pass. If you've ever watched The Vampire Diaries, or really any supernatural show, or, about serial killers, anything like that, anything about psychology, and people will say, I just flipped the switch. I just turned it off. What does that really mean? What did they turn off? They stopped caring. Well, how did they stop caring? They stopped thinking the thoughts. They didn't let it get to them. I bet every single listener can think of a time that they've got there at least once in their life. This takes almost no effort and is done through pure presence in the moment. Here's an analogy from one of my mentors that illustrates this concept. Imagine I give you a bowl of cloudy, dirty, murky water. If I asked you how you would make the water clear, how would you do it? Take 15 seconds or pause the podcast. All right. Most people say something like filtering the water or even boiling it. What most people don't realize is that if we let the bowl of dirty water sit for a period of time, we can see that the dirt begins to settle on its own in the water. And after a while, the water becomes clear on its own. This is how our minds also work. If we let our thinking sit without disturbing it, trying to filter or boil it, the thinking will settle down on its own and our minds will become free from thinking. The natural state of water is clear, and the natural state of our minds is also clear if we do not disturb it. If life begins to feel unclear, disorganized, and stressful, and you're not sure what to do next, you now know that it's only because your thinking is stirring up the dirt, making your mind cloudy and difficult to see ahead. You can use this as an indicator to help you realize you're thinking too much. Once we become aware of the fact that we are only ever feeling what we're thinking and that thinking is the root cause of our unpleasant experience, we see it for what it truly is. Then we allow it to settle by giving it space, and slowly we will see how we begin to have a clear mind again. You can also compare thinking to quicksand. The more we fight our thinking, the more it amplifies negative emotions and worsens them. The same is true for quicksand. If we're in quicksand, the way out is not to fight it. If we panic and frantically try to fight it, it only makes things worse by tightening the grip it has on us and pulling us under faster. Not to mention exerting all of your energy in one lump sum right away, therefore tiring yourself out and weakening yourself quicker. The only way out is to stop struggling and allow your body's natural buoyancy to take over to bring you back to surface easily. The only way to break free from our thinking is to let go and trust that our natural inner wisdom will guide us back to clarity and peace like it always has. If you find yourself fluctuating between thinking and non-thinking, know that it is completely okay and quite normal. There is no way that we can remain in a state of non-thinking every second of every single day. And if we try to make that a goal, we will cause ourselves to suffer by forcing ourselves back into thinking again. We are spiritual, infinite beings having a physical, finite experience. Because of this, we are a living gateway between the human and the divine. So we will naturally oscillate between the two states of feeling anxious and stressed and joyful and peaceful. We cannot control or prevent the oscillation between thinking and non-thinking, but we can minimize the time spent thinking and thus create more moments where we feel joyful, peaceful, passionate, and full of love. Absolutely. I meditate and ground myself outside 2 to 3 times per day. And when I say the 3 pillars have been positively impacted my mind, body, and spirit by doing so, I cannot speak any higher on it. And honestly, I know I'm in the middle of this book, but listeners, I do run a consulting company. If you would like any help in this regard, I am a life coach. You can connect with me by either commenting on the podcast, or you can email me directly, which is in the description of the podcast as well. So if you are still struggling even after this book and you want some help, I am also a life coach. So that is available to you. But carrying on, it is just a part of our beautiful human experience. What can give us true peace is knowing that we will always have the state of pure peace, love, and fulfillment underneath any thinking that we may ever have at any given moment. The beautiful state we always want is something we can never lose, but only forget. Just because we can forget it doesn't mean it's not there. Just like when it becomes night and the sun sets, we know the sun is always there, we just can't see it. If we think when the sun sets that it may never come back, then understandably, we will have a lot of anxious and fearful thoughts. The same is true for our state of being. We are ever only one moment away from remembering that we always have the infinite well of clarity, love, joy, peace, and fulfillment. We will forget sometimes, but when we do remember and realize that we are caught up in our thinking, when we experience negative emotions, that alone will allow us to return home to our natural, beautiful state. All we have to do is remember it. Know that this is just our thinking and have peace knowing that the sun is not gone forever and we will rise again soon enough. Having that understanding will also allow us to appreciate the nighttime for its existence and role in the universe. From that, we can see how it is meant to be a part of our human experience and begin to cherish its beauty as much as the sun. Yes, 100%. Chapter 8. How can we possibly thrive in the world without thinking? James Clear said, "Anxiety is thought without control. Flow is control without thought." Put that on a billboard now. Here's a question that will guide you to an insight about this question. What thoughts are going through your head when you're doing your absolute best work, where you're fully captivated, aka focus mode, creator mode, God mode, and entranced by what you're doing at that moment? Take 15 seconds, pause the video, think on that. If you still haven't had the insight or epiphany from the answer, here's another question that may point in the right direction. When you love what you do so much and are completely engrossed in it, that you lose all sense of time and space, aka when you're in a state of complete flow, what thoughts are going through your mind as soon as you're in the state of flow at that moment? All right, so you can pause the video, but I do want to say something important. I now focus my projects and my schedule on focus mode, God mode, creator mode, executive brain mode. If you follow the Stephen Covey trainings, a lot of people talk about this. Like, once you understand how you personally best work, and you only figure it out when you're passionate about whatever it is you're doing. If you have no passion, don't even consider thinking that this is an option for this analogy, because you have to have enough passion to get to this state. Like for me, I absolutely loved it when I worked in human resources for a lot of time, and I thought it was what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. But the underlying thing that I loved about it so much was helping humans. It's always been something I've been passionate about. So when I get the opportunity to work on projects like this, or writing my book that also is helping humans, or my other podcasts, or any of the other projects I'm working on that are aligned with that passion and my mission in life, it takes no thought at all to wake up and be excited about doing what I'm doing. I don't have a concept of time. In fact, I look at the clock after I'm working on my projects and I'm like, how did the entire day just fly by? I literally got so much done. I pat myself on the back. Why? Because it's not work. I'm passionate about it. It's not work. Even though it's actually my job, when it doesn't feel like a job because you're passionate about it and you can get lost in that passion and create something beautiful in the process, that is what we've all been chasing. That's joy. That's happiness, right? Just food for thought. When you are doing your best work and are in a total state of flow, I wanted to add this because it's super important. I will say, once I honed in on my God mode, creator mode, focus mode, and you start learning what works best for you, take note of it, write it down, do whatever, and stick with it and adjust as necessary. For example, when I want to be in my creator mode and I'm not filming something for that creation or that project, so I'm okay to have background noise, I do my absolute best work when I listen to a very specific 1.5 hour long YouTube video that is my favorite cover of a very long orchestra. I put that on purpose. I light a candle and my favorite incense, and I get myself into the habit of setting it to be cozy and comfy. And when I'm writing my book or my books, while I'm doing that, I'm setting the mood. I wear my favorite pair of sweatpants, light an extra candle. But even when I was working physically in a manufacturing plant for all those years, I would still do the same thing, but in a different capacity. When I'd get to work, I'd have a bulleted list and it'd match my chalkboard on the wall, and it would be, here's my task list for the day. And I was very organized about it. Okay, I got to do this, check it off. Got to do this, check it off. You set the pace for how you will be the most successful version of yourself and be the most efficient person. Because my focus mode can last anywhere from 4 hours to 12 hours. And I get myself in the best possible situation where there's no disturbances. So my phone goes on do not disturb. 100% it's on do not disturb. I don't want to hear that thing. I don't want to see it. I don't want to know anything about it. It doesn't exist. I put my favorite orchestra symphony on, light a candle and an incense. I get all of my books organized and I focus. And that's what I do. The only break I get is when I go to the bathroom, because I don't break out of that mode. But it took a lot. Do you know how long it took me to realize I can't not have my phone like on do not, I can't have my phone just sitting there. It has to be on do not disturb. Why? Because prior, I didn't think anything of the fact that, oh, it's just a quick text message, ping, stop, look at it, blah, blah, blah. Well, I have ADHD. Like my brain, it's going 1,000,000 miles per hour. I have now come to terms with the fact that even a simple text message, when I am in that mode, will completely throw me off my entire game. It could be the difference between interlinking a thought and an epiphany and a light bulb and an amazing idea with losing it because one text message comes in that means nothing. You know what I'm saying? Set up yourself for success when you work on anything. Make sure your environment makes you want to be in the environment. Make it cozy, make it comfy, if whatever it is, if you got to study for exams, if you are going to the gym, if you have a home gym, make it an environment and a place and an area that you want to hang out in to work on all these things. All right, another tangent from Cassie. All right, when you are doing your best work, are in a total state of flow, where there is no separation between you and the work you are doing, you have no thoughts. And if you have thoughts, they're flowing right through you without you having to think about them. In other words, the state of peak performance for humans can be described as a state of non-thinking. It may seem crazy, but we do our best work when we aren't thinking, and you just proved it with your own experience. Creepy. I did, didn't I? Here's another example that will help illuminate the truth of this topic. When professional or even Olympic athletes are competing, do you think they are thinking or overanalyzing every single thing that's happening during the game? How much thinking do you think is going on during the competition for them? The highest performing athletes will describe when they are in their peak state that they are in the zone. The zone is the state of flow or non-thinking. In Japanese culture, they have a beautiful word to describe this phenomenon. It's called mushin. Here's the definition from Shotoko Katims. Again, sorry if I butchered that. Mushin is achieved when the mind is free of random thoughts, free of anger, free of fear, and particularly free of ego. It applies during combat and or other facets of life. When mushin is achieved during combat, there is an absence of loose or rambling thoughts. It leaves the practitioner free to act and react without hesitation. He reacts according to all the study and training that has brought karateka to this point, relying on not what you think should be your next move, but on what your trained, instinctive, subconscious reaction directs you to do. After practice, thinking hinders the performance of athletes, and the same is true for everyone. We only hesitate, are reluctant, have doubts and insecurities and fears only when we begin thinking and overanalyzing. For example, you're only afraid of the dark because you start thinking about what could be in the dark. Had you not started thinking about what's in the dark, you wouldn't be scared of the dark. We function, perform our best, and embody our full potential when we enter a non-thinking state. Without thinking, we are free from the limitations of the ego and can create the most incredible things in the entire world. I'm going to not agree with that and say the entire universe. I'm not asking you to adopt this belief, but to try it and experience it for yourself so that you gain the insight to make it on your own.